Mm. Dark Evil Mac, the only gamer. It's only you. Soon more gamers will filter in. I don't know much about half-baked takes. What are his opinions? YouTube. Ugh, bro. My hair is so uncooperative today. Maybe I could put it in a ponytail. Right-leaning centrist. That's cool. I don't see any hair ties. Tragic. Pew. Pew, pew, pew. Janusz Kabaczynski. Wow, hello. You have an unpronounceable Eastern European name. I love that. I would stream at a time when people are off work. Maybe I should do later streams. I don't know. Um, I'd be down to do that. In general, I want to stream more. Yeah, I like dual streaming. In fact, I'm streaming to like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. I sort of want to set it up so I'm streaming to TikTok as well in the future. Mm, make that better, maybe. Total streaming platform domination. So true. I can't believe I don't have any hair ties. That is tragic. Like, I don't know if they just fell, because usually I have one on my desk. I had this really annoying thing where, because I am like self-employed, I have to pay quarterly taxes. And one of the quarterly tax payments that I made, I marked the wrong year on the form by accident. I marked this year instead of last year. And so the IRS came to me and they were like, yo, you owe, you owe us $7,000 more. And it's going up every day. And I was like, what? And then I checked like my records and I was like, I paid like that 7,000 whatever dollars. Um, and I realized that the year was wrong. And so I just like gave them extra money this year. And so it's like this whole nightmare within my own record keeping because I've got to like manually like take it out and then like re-record it as like or wrong date, but it's just like a disaster in QuickBooks. Um, but yeah, I got this like letter and I was like freaking out. So I have like all the letter stuff on my desk. I don't know. I'm starting to think that like the best form of therapy would just be to hire an accountant because it would solve so much stress. And I hate doing my own taxes, so I think I end up overpaying a lot in taxes because I don't want to like work and find all of the little like ways to save money. Russian or Ukrainian, neither. I have not any kind of Slavic to my knowledge. I think that my mother is my penis looks Slavic. What does that mean? Both my parents are half Jewish, and my father is half Jewish, half Swedish. And I just inherited like all of the Scandinavian looks from my grandmother, who came from Sweden, which is crazy because like I don't know, my grandmother's genetics were just like so powerful. She married this Jewish lawyer and then gave birth to my father, who's like this blonde, blue eyed baby. And my mother has like dark black hair and a darker complexion than I do, at least. But yeah, my father's genetics were just like, I just bulldozed through. But yeah, my mother is like half Jewish through her mother. And then her father is like Native American slash, I don't know, just like white people mix. Her father doesn't look like that native, but um, yeah, I just don't look like my mother at all. I am circumcised, yeah. But lots of Americans are circumcised. So, okay, I want to. Well, okay, I want to watch one of their things. He did hippy dippy recruitment, talking to not so erudite. Not so erudite is so fucking based. I love her. talk to Gremlo? I talk to Gremlo. Mm. I also had a conversation on Twitter with Adam Friended. I think it'd be fun to stream with him. Because I disagree with him pretty strongly like on selectorate theory. I just think the selectorate theory is too narrow of a theory. And doesn't have enough explanatory power. Like selectorate theory fails to explain both autocratic corporate governance, which is like the primary mode of production for most things in the world, and it fails to explain like the success of most civilizations in human history, which have been autocratic. Um, it also fails to explain like the fall of the Roman Republic and Athens. I think that selector theory like works in this very like specific mode of analysis, which is looking at like the modern geopolitical situation, um, and like how America relates to other states. I think that's where selectorate theory works. But like the reason why it works there is because like the modern geopolitical situation is such that leaders are or people are really like constrained by physical boundaries. Like if you go back in time, borders were, much more porous in a lot of ways. If for no other reason than because like the ability to actually like categorize and draw maps was like much harder to do without satellites. And I guess I should finish that thought. Because borders were so porous, there was like a real incentive to try to like retain land and people and to incorporate people as like productive labor capital into your empire. So like the ability to take land was really important. Um, and to like integrate people. So you see like very successful empires, like the Roman Empire. One of the reasons they're so successful is because they're able to like go into these little towns and set up colonial outposts and integrate like the local customs and integrate like the local people into their empire. And it's not like out of the goodness of their hearts, it's because they want to like levy taxes on these people. But they're also bringing roads and infrastructure. So, and they want to be like nice because they know that these people, they can leave easily. Should go on Adam and Stitch. Stitch seems to be a lot easier to talk to. I don't mind. I think that I'm probably fairly easy to talk to. So I think I'm pretty like conciliatory. But yeah, I think it'd be fun to talk to. Because I think I can explain the ideas in a way that he'd find plausible. Okay, so like North Korea, right? He says, thinks but hard disagree. Without the fear of losing their jobs, leaders have no incentive to make people happy. There's too much evidence to deny this. North Korea is a shithole because productive people would threaten the leadership's power. This is true, but it's also true that the reason North Korea is a shithole is because Kim Jong Un has the fear of losing his job, and his power is tied to keeping up this like slave plantation slash like mafia-style control over the government and over North Korea. And also because the geopolitical situation is such that it's very hard for major nation states to invade each other. One of the reasons for this is nukes. So, like, within the geopolitical framework of modern technology and of the modern sort of Bretton Woods agreement, like American power, it's very hard for states to like break out of that and engage in invasion without experiencing massive sanctions. And so like Russia's experiencing this now, where if you go to any other time in human history, like the ability to invade is easier because you don't have this like massive hegemon in the United States and NATO, which is going to be able to sanction and impose all of these issues on your country if you invade. And so, like, in that sort of paradigm, Kim Jong Un has like a really big incentive to just keep his people as poor and as illiterate as possible. You see a similar thing happen in African dictatorships where the country is sitting on like mines for diamonds or cobalt or whatever, and they're whoever's running the country is able to just like invite in foreign contractors and have them mine out the cobalt and receive tons of money for this. And at the same time, they receive like foreign aid from IMF and the World Bank. And these dictators are able to accrue massive amounts of wealth while pretty much like ignoring their population. And when you have that sort of scenario where like you're very like resource dependent, or any amount of productivity or happiness or literacy of the population is an existential threat to your power, then it's true that, yeah, like these autocratic regimes are not going to be good for the people. But once you move out of that paradigm, out of that, like, resource dependency, or moving out of sort of this like mafia style state, then the dynamic totally shifts. And you see that in somewhere like Singapore, where Singapore is highly autocratic, yet it's highly successful. Why is that? Well, selectorate theory can't explain that. But yeah, North Korea is terrible. Okay. I'm going to invite this guy to Discord. Oh my god, what the fuck? This person posted bullshit. Don't post NSFW. Oh god. Okay. I didn't know Project survived it. Interesting fact. Here, here. It's me. Oh, Actually, I'm going to make this stricter. You're going to get one warning if you post an SFW. Mm. Last night, I stayed up so late drinking and talking to people. I don't know what the topic is. I think he's just going to like interview me, ask questions. I think that I'm going to do, I think we're going to do like the whole I define my ideology, my belief system, which I want to do a scripted video on. That's something that I'm working on because a few days ago, I I just like sat down and like had the random urge to write, and I wrote like three 3 or 4 pages of just like single spaced description of what I believe politically. Because I think that my political beliefs are like very confusing for people. And they're very unusual. I think that I transcend the political compass in a lot of ways. And so I just wanted to be able to like, I want to have something that I can point to and be like, watch this to understand. Singapore is a great place. I'm currently reading a book on Singapore. Um, but yeah, super interesting. Also, I'm wearing very minimal makeup today, and my skin looks really good. So I think that I'm gonna wear less makeup in general. Because I think that like I don't know, maybe I'm just like not that good at putting on makeup. But a lot of times when I put on more makeup, like when I do like contouring and stuff, I think I end up looking just like sort of dirty, and it's not good. Mm. But yeah, I'm tired. Tired today. I don't need braces though. I have very straight teeth. I had braces when I was a teenager. Fake braces, like Belle. I feel like that would not look good on me. I don't really think my look is like. I think Belle Delphine does like the very like cutesy sort of. I don't know how to say this. Like pedo bait look, or like I don't know. She looks very young. She like goes for that sort of look. I feel like that's not really my look. I don't think it's just an e-girl look though. I think she like courts this sort of like Lolita appearance. And I don't think that like my face shape or appearance really lends itself to that. I think I have more of like a mature look. Face sitting POV stuff. I have like a lot of acne on the back of my legs. And then just in general, I don't think they look that good. So I tend not to do a lot of like shots or video of my bum or back legs. Is it because of shaving? I don't think so. But shaving makes it worse. I have very sensitive skin. And so when I do shave, I get like really bad, um, what's it called? Like ingrown hairs and stuff. I think what I'm gonna do with Twitter, because I've also been thinking about this, is as far as like the NSFW stuff, what I'm gonna do is I'm going to upload more like more safe work stuff in that like I'll upload like lingerie pics, but I don't want to show genitalia. So I think that's what I'll move to when it comes to Twitter. And then I'll also mark it as like sensitive content, which means it'll show up like blurred and you'll need to click it to like actually see what it is. Me too. My skin be wanting to get dry. I have to use moisturizers and conditioners a lot. Yeah, me too. That was the biggest thing that's helped me like fight that issue. It's just like really aggressively moisturizing post shower. But yeah, what I think I'll do is just make Twitter more safe and also mark things. Conditioner. I use moisturizer on my body and like my legs. I can't do laser on my body because my hair is blonde. Unfortunately. Laser works by targeting like the pigment in the hair. And the hair on my legs is not pigmented enough. You can do electrolysis, I believe, to do permanent hair removal if you have blonde hair, but it's expensive and time consuming and difficult. Okay, we're gonna start talking to Todd. Can we have a picnic debate? Picnic. I don't know if I have anything to debate about picnics. At first I thought I read that wrong, and you were trying to say picnic date. But I'm not exactly sure what a picnic debate would consist of. Bro, why am I so tired today? Probably because I stayed up really late. And also streaming is just tiring. Apologize for acting up. I didn't notice if you were acting up. Yo. Oh, I can't hear you. 1 second. Yeah, I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, I
Very
can.
cool.
I'm going to pop out your screen and put you on. Yeah.
Sounds good. Is my voice coming in all right?
Yep, I think you're good.
Awesome. How is your day going?
It's going good. Woke up bright and early, got some coffee, started the stream.
Um, Bright and early. I love that. Yes,
Yeah.
it's getting going. Day's just getting going.
Mm-hmm.
So you've been busy lately, like in terms of you've been on panels and shit talking about yourself. Is that weird?
I don't think so. I don't know. It was at first. It's a very sort of different world to exist in. It's very stressful to like talk live and realize that like, oh, thousands of people are watching this. But yeah, I don't know. Getting used to it for sure.
Yeah, well, it's good to see. Like, it's nice when there are people that like, because you see these meteoric rises happen for people, and
Hmm.
there's so many that you're like, oh my fucking god, like, why did that have to happen to you of all the people? And then finally, we get somebody that's sensible and logical and coming from like a not crazy position. Uh, it's as somebody who hopes to have an arc, uh, even 1/10 of what you had, um, that is good to see because typically it's just the people who are fucking crazy that end up
Hmm.
getting that.
Yeah, I think that there's like a real selection for craziness on the internet. And you definitely feel it when you're like invited to panels and there's a sort of expectation that you're going to bring drama and disagreement. And if you're like very sensible and sort of moderate on things, that's not always what sells. So
No,
definitely attention there.
no, if you're gonna come from the center and try to do the um, like actually moderate or like try to find the logical or the best uh like conclusion regardless of like ideological stances. I think you have to do it in an entertaining way and you have to be able to like keep people's attention, which you do. Which like counterpoints has a way of doing this too, where it's like they're good at um, not coming across as like milk toast,
Mhm.
coming across as like principled, but not just falling into an ideological like box, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like a lot of times there's a lot of pressure to like put yourself in a box and to tell people like, this is like my affiliation and I'm going to align with this all the time. And it can be frustrating for people when you're like, well, I'm sort of like moderately right leaning, and sometimes that means I support this issue or that issue, but it's going to be hard to predict.
Yeah, you're not rewarded, and you're not like you're not receiving the gratification that the ideologues do. Because
Mhm.
when you just like when you know that somebody's gonna clap for you if you say this thing, um, it's real easy to just be like, well, fuck it, I'm just gonna say this thing. It's the easier of the two routes. Um, and that's why like maybe not so much with like hippy dippies and like the panel shows, because I understand why people have to be hyperbolic in those, because you're only given a small amount of time and you got to get a lot out, and you don't want to, you can't touch on all the points that were said, so you kind of have to just like pick and choose your battles.
Mhm.
But when it comes to like when you can actually flesh people's thoughts out, and like when you can actually like drill down on what people believe, um I think like you can figure out really quick that most people are not like these drastic extremes. They just know that they're supposed to say something, and then they do it. Sorry, I don't know if that siren's coming through, but
It's all right. Um, yeah, I think that's true. I think that's especially true in real life, where, most people are just not that politically aligned, or they don't think that hard about politics. And so if you speak to your average voter or just like your average person who is out in the world, a lot of times you'll find that they have a lot of very contradictory or just like a very wide variety of beliefs. And on the internet, the expectation is very much that you're going to fall in line with like one or two ideologies.
yeah. So, and that's like a big part of what the reason I started doing all of this is I was reaching out to content creators, um, not as a content creator, but I'm a master's student working on my capstone thesis,
Mm.
and the paper was initially, and I may change it, but I was trying to figure out what is the relationship between online political like interactions and discourse and like how people operate and it and like present themselves. How does that reflect upon in real life politics? How does that reflect upon a person's like willingness to go vote or campaign or whatever it may be? And then also like how do these we seem to see very far left and very far right um, positions uh, like just shouted out onto the internet, and almost so much that they start to feel normal when I just have never thought that to be true. And um, I want to figure it out because I don't know if I'm blinded by my own like natural like sensibilities to be in the center and to look at things from both sides, um, or if this is just actually how things are and not so like crazy.
I mean, there has been like, I don't know exactly where you are with your thesis. I'd be interested to know what you found. But like, my understanding is that, at least in the United States, the political parties have become more polarized, especially on the left, but the right has also polarized in some ways and moved further right.
See, and that's what I'm worried about is it seems like we are becoming or like pushing farther and farther right as parties and as oh my god, what did somebody die? Yeah, so if I don't know if these because the parties are they have a natural inclination to butt heads, and they are fighting like a battle that they have to win. So they have to separate themselves from the other side. But at the end of the day, they're supposed to work together to come to agreements that will naturally fit the like what's the word I'm looking for? America is a diverse culture and like diverse politically as much as anything. So it's like typically when that's the case, you're gonna have to like compromise and find ways of working together. But parties themselves, and this is why like people like Alexander Hamilton like warned about the threat of political parties, is because it fractions the country, and it naturally causes strife and disagreement, and chaos eventually ensues.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I think that there's this like politicization of pretty much every topic in modern politics and in modern life. So like, being trans, or the whether or not you should take the COVID vaccine, or whether or not the country should, leave the European Union. These are all topics that like have become widely discussed, and the expectation is that like if you are a person in the society, you have an opinion on these things, even if you're not actually someone directly affected by the topic, or someone who actually has like knowledge in the topic. So, just in like when it comes to trans issues, it's shocking to me that it is as big of a conversation as it is, because like the number of trans people that exist in the world is incredibly minuscule, and the degree to which they affect like the broader culture is also incredibly minuscule, and yet
Yeah.
it's like one of the most talked about topics ever. And I think it's really like this politicization of every topic, the expectation that everyone has an opinion on everything, that really causes people to divide and take up these stances, when it's just, in reality, it's totally unnecessary.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because the trans issue I think is probably the most like obvious one. Um, but the culture wars and the social aspect of politics, um, it it's become the forefront. Like people used to talk about politics as it related to the economy, and yeah, like the economy. It was a very much fiscally minded decision whether you were more pro taxation and the welfare state versus being more like individualistic, less taxation, um, and that was what kind of divided Americans. And now it's starting to become these like, how do you like, what are your thoughts on trans issues? What are your thoughts on like, um, I hate saying CRT because it's not CRT, but like, what are your thoughts on
Modern social
teaching like
justice.
race? Yeah, like race issues or racism in school. Uh, I, I just, I don't know about you, but I just don't give a shit about that stuff. Like, if your um, local community school board feels it necessary to do that, they have a right to do that. They can have these programs and they can have these curriculums. And then if you don't like it, there are mechanisms in place for you and your community to remove that school board and then adjust it. Um, it's when I think what you're saying is true, the politicization of everything. But it's like, because it's people think like it's all federal, like everything has become like these federal issues and things that we have to do at a national level, when in fact, one, you really can't do much at the federal level, and then two, it's not really politically like, it's it doesn't matter. Like, you like, why do you care what some fucking kid is learning in San Francisco? You live in Montgomery, Alabama. fuck off. Is your kid learning that? No? Okay, then you have nothing to worry about.
Or
So,
vice versa. If you're like a parent and you really want your children to understand like LGBT issues, like you can talk to your kid about LGBT issues. Like you don't necessarily need your school board to like do that
yes.
for them.
Oh,
Um,
yes. I agree there too, 100%.
I think
But
it's
just like as
interesting.
a policy, my bad. I do want to stress I am a fan with I don't think the government can do everything for you, but yes, when we are talking about what the government can do.
Well, yeah, and I think you're bringing up like Alexander Hamilton, and I think if you like go back and read, things that were written by the founding fathers, if you read the Federalist Papers, you see like you see a lot of interesting things, but like one of those interesting things is this like insistence that the government that's going to be founded in the United States is not one that's going to be heavy-handed or is going to have like a ton of federal oversight over the states. It's going to allow people like the freedom to choose their community and choose, what represents their own beliefs. And then you also see like a real fear about the tyranny of the majority and, the politicization and the development of political parties that sort of turn everything into a battleground when really it would be better solved if it were left up to like people who really understand the issues or left up to people who are really affected to figure out how they're going to engage with the topic for themselves.
And by doing that, that typically leads to slow but progressive change. Like the reason our systems are the way they are, they're built like Thomas Jefferson talked about how a society that doesn't progress and just holds true to its like traditions is like a society that it should die and is meant to die. We should move forward as we learn and grow. But we need to do this at a slow, conservative pace as to ensure that we don't swing the bar too far and then get a countermeasure. Like there's an opposite reaction to every action. And if you don't believe me, go look at how and I'm saying you, but like the audience, like look at how like in America, the voting patterns always typically run the same way. Why is it a foregone conclusion that Biden and the Democrats are going to get mollywopped in November? It's because typically the party that has the presidency in the mid-year elections in between the presidential elections, they typically get smacked in the mouth. So we can look at these things and see how, okay, well, when we do one thing for a little bit, we typically like to think the grass is greener on the other side, so we immediately jump back to voting for the other one, or the independents do. So it's like we naturally just go back and forth. So if we allow for big changes to happen every 4 years, it would be fucking chaos. It would be absolute. And sorry, I'll let you can talk from there. Sorry, I'm on your stream, so.
I mean, no, I agree with a lot of what you're saying, just as far as like, I think a lot of times on the left, people will see things that genuinely have problems. So like, I think a lot of left-wing people will point to something like gender roles, gender expectations, and they'll say that like, hey, the expectation that like men never show emotion, that can be really toxic and prevent men from talking about their feelings. It can cause them to bottle up their emotions. It can cause them to get into like toxic relationships and not be able to speak out and whatnot. And so they see that like genuinely toxic thing. But then what they want to do is they want to like tear everything down in order to get rid of that toxic thing. And so then you get like gender abolitionism. And I think it's really like when you go too far, you can sometimes forget why. Like every culture, every successful civilization on Earth for all of human history has had expectations for how men and women are supposed to act. So like maybe there's like a reason for this. Maybe like there's some value in like a man's ability to be an emotionally stabilizing force. And so like being able to find that value and say like, okay, this is like a principle that's good. It's good if you can be emotionally stable, and control your emotions to have a sense of stoicism within yourself. But it's bad if that turns into like an expectation that you never have emotions. And finding like what is valuable in an expectation, I think, is really important. And it's very easy and tempting to just like tear everything down and throw the baby out with the bathwater. And that happens on issue after issue.
Yes. And when the idea is to, rather than fix a thing, let's just destroy it. Until you can come to me with something that you're going to do that's better, or is that you feel can provide society with more value, shut the fuck up. We're not just going to do away with these things. And the gender thing, and the way that, like, I'm such a novice with the whole topic. And I mean, in my first debate that I ever did, a long time ago, modern day debates had me come on and talk trans issues with Jangles. I don't know if you know who that.
Yeah, I'm
Oh my
familiar.
god! Oh my god! He just fucking ate me. He ate me alive for about 2 hours, and I was like, okay, I thought I could do some research into this. Blah, blah. Nope, you can't do that because you'll quickly. So
I've had similar
with
experiences. Yeah, like
yeah,
one of the hardest things to learn in like online politics is just like how to take L's occasionally. Because like if you talk to enough people on enough topics, eventually you're gonna find someone who just like knows more than you, or is able to get like a really good like moment where they get like a sick own, or you misspeak or whatever. And yeah, that happens for sure.
so like I'm open to hearing every idea that these advocates have. If you can bring me statistics and studies and data, I typically can look at that shit rationally and then change or alter the way that I thought about something, because I can realize I was wrong. However, when we have something like toxic masculinity, or how we should treat the average kid, or the average, like when we're talking, like when we're giving advice, or we're talking about like anything like this, we're talking about for the average person. There are always going to be situations and anomalies that um, we have to like alter shit for. But like, to say that because it is the right thing to do, altering, these traditions, or altering these things for like one person, therefore we should just get rid of all of it and just not do it for anyone, um, seems silly. And I don't know if that's just because I'm biased, and I've seen the positives that came from like me being taught those traditional man and woman gender role, these basic gender roles. Um, but yeah, I don't know. It just seems ridiculous that we would just be that we toss it all out.
Well, I think that one of the things about humans is that we're very much storytelling creatures, and we rely a lot on heuristics as a way to make sense of the world. And so I think that like when we look at gender or even like religion, and maybe that's something we can go into a little bit more, uh, is that these stories that we tell each other about how, for example, men and women need to relate to each other, they're ways they are able to communicate morals and virtues to people in a way that's very digestible, in a way that people can really internalize and remember and apply to their lives. And so I think that like what they are really is a heuristic, and heuristics have flaws and failures and issues with them, and they're not applicable in every situation, but that doesn't mean they're not useful. And so I think that like we see this a lot in dating culture as well, where like if you go back to the 1920s, or 1930s, 1950s, not even that long ago, there were like more established norms for how you engaged in courtship and for how men were supposed to, find women and date them and treat them. And when we've moved away from that with the sexual liberation and with gender abolition, I think we've left a lot of young men feeling very lost and not really understanding how to navigate that dating world. And so those courtship like stories, the stories we tell each other about how men need to like relate to women and date them, they have issues, right? And you can like recognize those issues, but I think you can also recognize that they have some sort of use in society. And like, just going back to religion very quickly, I think that like people recognize toxic elements of organized religion. And so they were like very quickly to try to critique that and break down those religions. But also religion was and continues to be a huge source of community in people's lives. And so when you get rid of like religion in general, you lose that community aspect. And I think that there's so many instances in society, even just in like cultural issues, where breaking things down or abolishing things has these unintended effects years later down the road.
Can I point out another good one?
Yeah,
It's
please.
like America as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
Like you will constantly hear lefties and left-leaning people, left-leaning Americans, talk shit about America and talk about how it as an institution needs to like dissolve and go away, despite it being the greatest force for good the world has ever seen. And it's literally not close. And I will fucking fight that argument till the day I die, tooth and nail, because people don't realize at the stage that we are now, and like the economic like our control of not only our own economy but like the rest of the world's,
It's huge.
it's not comparable to anything that has ever happened in history. And like people talk about like all these great empires that have come from ancient history all the way up into um like the late thousands to early 2000. They literally didn't touch America's like proportionally to the rest of societies that they were working against. And then our military on top of that could theoretically like dwarf almost the rest of the world's militaries, in spending, in equipment, all of these things. They will talk about like matter that has no positive, because we had slavery, then we had Jim Crow, and then we had the Indian, like the genocide. I'll say genocide to not piss off a bunch of people, but like you could make an argument that it wasn't a genocide, it was a war and conquest. But I don't want to fucking split hairs. America has done terrible things compared to what it's done for like the good. Is just it's not comparable. But the lefties will say that America has to go. America should burn.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's funny that you say like America's so powerful because you're absolutely right. And like if you just look at like geopolitical tensions, like America is so overpowered in like every scenario. We're talking about Taiwan and like Taiwan invasion. And China is basically encircled in the South China Sea by American allies. And the question is like, will China be able to like control access to like the broader ocean without being like surrounded by America, and therefore like basically de facto controlled whether or not they can exit into the Pacific Ocean by America allowing them to do so. And that's like, imagine if China were the one like controlling Cuba or Puerto Rico or like one of these islands and just being like, no, like American ships, if they want to go out into the oceans, like they can't do that unless we allow them to. That would be like the equivalent of like the situation that America now has like around China. And so, and I don't think that China's going to be able to take Taiwan personally. And that's like an insane factor that like one of the greatest geopolitical struggles in the next coming decades is whether or not China will have like real access to the broader oceans through the South China Sea in like a way that like they have had for pretty much like all of Chinese culture's existence.
Every other Chinese culture, or what are they called? Or what? People that control their borders and their able ability up until now.
Up until now, when America's like, well, we're going to decide whether or not you're able to do this. And people don't appreciate that because, like, American culture and American hegemony is so ubiquitous. It's like, you know, a fish swimming in water and it doesn't understand what water is because it exists all around them. That's really like where we exist with American hegemony. And so it's very easy to like critique all of the bad things because people assume that the good things are just like baked into the way that the world works. I mean, like you bring up slavery, and I think people also like they lost faith in like Britain and in a lot of cultural touchstones of Western Europe. And like Britain, for as much as they perpetrated the slave trade, they also ended it in their colonies. And they patrolled the high seas at enormous costs themselves. And it was because they believed in something morally. And so I think that like you also have to look at it from that perspective and see that like, yes, America has like these issues, but they've also done enormous things as well.
Yeah, and like you said, I think religion is another good example of like I'm not religious, but I'm not like so naive that I look at it and think, oh well, fucking, we should just get rid of this thing that we've done. We've shown a propensity to do basically for all of human history. Why would I think it'd be a good thing to just remove that from the human existence? Do you think it's just like a god complex these people have, like this, like they, or maybe not god complex, but like an elitism, like they just think they know better, or they think they can do better, like where do you think this comes from? Because that's what interests me.
I
Yeah.
think that there are people who are very predisposed to spending a lot of time thinking about what is theoretically the best way that humans can be and humans can live. These people are like utopians, really. And so I think that like a lot of people on the left, they have a tendency to like live in worlds of like theory and utopia. And that ways of thinking of being like very focused on like theoretical utopias tends to end up losing sight of like the practical realities and benefits of religion or anything else. And so like I think that one of the differences between conservatives and progressives is because like conservatives tend to have an intuitive understanding that like if something has worked for generations, there's probably a reason why, even if it's not obvious. And so having some faith in existing institutions and a skepticism about radical changes to them is really what like keeps people in a more conservative mindset. And if you have a more liberal mindset, I think your tendency is to not really care about that like intuitive sense of what has worked and to really only focus on like a theoretical what could work. And this is why like progressives and leftists, will say things like, well, real communism has never been tried, and we just need to keep working towards that theoretical utopia, ignoring like the kind of practical reality of like the continued failures to implement that theoretical utopia.
I had a PhD candidate who was teaching an undergrad class. Like I went into his office hours and he said that to me. He said real communism had never been tried, and I had like I fought that day. Like had an internal struggle of like I should probably leave this university like right now. Like
Yeah.
oh my god, oh this man is employed. No, but yeah, I don't. So the utopia thing is interesting because I don't want to believe that people are so naive to think that way and to have um these worldviews. But I guess it does. We see it expressed so often online. I should probably start to open up myself more to believing that because you're probably right. But then on the same token, I don't know if uh, this will ever change. So I worry that like our political system or our political like tribalism is only going to continue to get worse and worse because the conservatives are starting to get more wild, in my opinion. I'm starting to see the right reacting to the crazy left in a way that is making the right obviously worse. Like perfect example, like the way that um, they're they're handling like the CRT and like again
Or
I
like
hate saying CRT,
QAnon.
like in QAnon and um, just in my opinion, like a lot of the Trump, like the MAGA part of the GOP is just just wanting to naturally drive to the right hard because we're seeing a push to the left happen in the Democratic Party. So
Yeah.
I don't know if you see that as well, but
No, I mean, I definitely do. I think that like one of the problems is that there's a real lack of like right-wing intellectual culture. Um,
oh my god,
Universities are like
oh my
very
god, yeah.
left-wing. And so like I think a lot of people who are more conservative minded, they tend to be like very skeptical about entering the university system. So there's like this selection bias there. And universities, because they tend to be so left wing, there's like this self censoring effect where like we know that conservative students who enter university tend to not like speak up about their opinions as much, and therefore are like less likely to find each other, and they're less
It's
likely to like
weird.
push back against the culture.
It's very annoying because like I have no problem. Like I was constantly like arguing with people in class, but I would have people after class come up and like, "Hey man, thanks for, saying something. I'm really good." Why? Like, okay, you're an adult. You probably should say something. And I guess like maybe if that's not your personality, that's okay. But like we have to push back on that. Like we have because it's not that like the colleges are just filled with kids that are all hardcore left wingers. It's just that like it's become socially like not okay to be conservative. Listen, as long as you're not saying anything fucking wrong or crazy and you're just speaking from a like a normal conservative mindset, no, you're not going to get in trouble. Like, you're not, I'm sorry. Like, some people might look at you a little weird or think you're a racist or whatever, but fuck them. Who cares?
Yeah, yeah, I mean, totally. And so, like, there's a sort of self-reinforcing effect with that, where it makes it so faculty tends to be like more progressive as well. People that go on to like higher education tend to be more progressive. And the people who are like doing peer review tend to be overwhelmingly progressive. And so, like, if something is borderline, right, like someone's submitting a paper that like has a little bit more of like a conservative conclusion, it's not crazy to me that like that might push someone to be like more critical of the paper, than they would otherwise if it was like already confirming their existing beliefs. And so I think the end result is that like in a lot of ways being right wing requires you to have a personality that like is willing to engage, is willing to be like a little bit combative, and is willing to like seek out um, seek out things that are challenging like the existing dominant progressive narrative. And like if you're doing that, if you're like the kind of person who's really seeking out alternative narratives, sometimes that leads you in like a crazy path. And I think that's what you see with like a lot of QAnon stuff, where like in order to be right wing, a lot of people are just like crazy, because like they're rejecting the entire narrative, but they don't really have like a right wing intellectual narrative that is correct to supplant the progressive narrative. And so they end up like adopting these beliefs that are really out there.
See, but here's my problem with QAnon, though, is I think QAnon is, it's just like the left wing is like the left wing, and I was also going to bring this up too, so we'll kind of talk about both, but like not just like academics, but the entertainment industry and the media
Media,
complex
yeah,
is
journalism.
overwhelmingly left. Um, and I hate when anybody argues with me on that, and like, no, like they're a bunch of right.
What about Tucker Carlson?
Yeah, it's like fuck off. Like when we look at the overwhelming like mainstream media sources, they typically lean left. Um, that obviously is going to drive culture's opinion left. And that's
Mhm.
not a good or a bad thing. I'm not telling you it's right or wrong. I'm just saying this is what it is.
Yeah, the way that
Um,
left wing ideas propagate is through very effective channels, which is mass media and
yeah.
universities.
And so I think with QAnon, it's those are just crazy people who have gotten amplified by those groups because it's politically useful for them to use QAnon as like a hammer to beat the right with, to go like, look at how crazy the right is, look at all these QAnoners, like, so I don't even think QAnon is that big of a deal personally,
I
because
mean,
I think it's
unfortunately,
such a,
it's like 15 to 20% of Americans believe in QAnon.
really?
Yeah, and like when
I
you
have
poll
not
them,
seen that
it's
data. Is
not
that
just like,
real?
yeah, it's not just like asking them like, do you believe in QAnon generally? But the questions get specific. They're like, do you believe that like there's a Democrat like pedophile cabal? And like you get verified
Really?
answers. So I think it's something you have to
Please,
really
I
contend
need to
with.
find these. I
Yeah.
gotta find that, because if that's true, okay, I'm going to. That will honestly become something I start fucking wholeheartedly attacking and going at. And the only reason I don't care about that shit right now is because I thought maybe 5% of the American population would believe. Because you can find 5% of Americans that'll believe just about anything. That's and that's why I'm always like a little like when people get hung up on like conspiracies and shit like that. Like conspiracies, people can get grabbed by that shit, and people can believe weird shit, and then you can always find 5% of a country of 330 million people. You can find 5% of it that'll believe anything. But
Yeah, so like
when it
according to
starts
this poll,
leaking into the main, I will then, yeah, 20%. That's
yeah,
scary.
like 23% of self-identified Republicans answered yes to the government media, and financial worlds in the US are controlled by a group of Satan worshipping pedophiles who run a global
Oh my,
child sex trafficking operation, which is like, that's a little bit scary if
that's,
that kind of idea is being propagated so thoroughly.
oh no. See, and and this is kind of what I was talking about is like, okay, so I worked as a I can probably say his name now, but I'm still not going to say it. I interned for a House of Representatives member, conservative, but he's like a moderate center right guy. He's very low key, not in the news very much. So, but in our district is very red. Um, we would get calls all the time about just how the whole point of the call would be tell me, an intern, how evil the Democrats are. How not only they believe a different thing than them, but they want like the person calling to die. They want all Republicans to die. They are, yeah, like they're pedophiles. They're fucking just this want to like demonize the
Mhm.
other side scares me,
And you see it
terrifies
on the
me.
left too. Like
Oh
there
yeah,
is
oh
this,
yes, obviously, but I like to come at the right sometimes because we're both
well, it's good to
right
like
wingers. Like
critique your
we,
own side. Yeah.
yes, that's what I
Um,
do a lot. Yeah,
but yeah,
but
there's
yes,
this
the
like,
left is terrible with this.
I remember seeing this subreddit called like Herman Cain Award. And it's like full of people who are like celebrating the deaths of people and like mocking them because like they didn't want to wear like a mask to Walmart and they like posted about that on Facebook. And it's like it's absolutely
Look at
psychotic to
Vosh.
engage in that behavior.
Look at
Yeah.
what Vosh has been doing. Like I've never had the chance to speak to Vosh. I would love to speak to Vosh. I know you just recently spoke to Vosh.
Mhm.
Um, but like my one big thing, the only thing I would want to talk about with the guy is and I know he's only doing it because he knows it's entertaining. He's bringing in views. This is how his channel grows. This is his like brand. But fuck you, you do not believe that these people are fucking evil and basically should be put in front of a fucking wall and shot because they are the equivalent of Nazi Germany.
Well, Vosh believes
It's
that there's like going to be a queer genocide.
well, that's what he cannot believe that. I'm so, like I can't believe that he's too smart. He is too smart to believe that we're equating or we're the don't say gay bill and
To
fucking
fucking genocide. No, it's horrific. And it's like,
he compared
it's
that to the
so
Night of the Long
insulting.
Knives.
Yeah, it's so
Like, get the
insulting.
fuck out of here. The Night of Broken Glass. I'm sorry. Like, what are you talking about? You fucking cunt. That is not. And all you're doing by saying shit like that is stirring up more violence. And I know he
Mhm.
constantly says, like, I'm okay with defensive violence and I'm okay with revolutionary political violence. Bitch, what? Like, yeah, if we were in Nazi Germany, I'm right there with you, buddy.
The
I
people who
already signed
say,
up.
like, I'm okay with political violence are like people who have not experienced political violence. Because, like,
Have not
when you,
experienced any violence.
yeah, when you
I,
have like riots that rip through your city and are like destroying things, that's when you really see, like, oh, this is serious. And like people's lives are destroyed when you engage in this sort of rhetoric that's like encouraging people to do things like this.
especially in a time where we're seeing fucking shootings in Buffalo like that were purely racially motivated, and then we're seeing the Waukesha shit where some dude who clearly had a beef with white people went and fucking drove over a bunch of fucking white people. The black dude in fucking New York that went to the subway shot a bunch of fucking people when he was going on race rants and shit. We are seeing the tensions and the heat getting driven up so high. We need to be pointing out the extremists and pointing out the fringes. And when you start saying that all Republicans, you start making it okay for his massive audience to go out and commit violence against people who do not deserve to have violence committed against them.
It's definitely very scary. And obviously, like, we see it from both sides again. Like, I hate to say that, but like, I think, or to like just be coming back to this because I sound like a broken record, but like when you look at like Christchurch or anything else, I mean, like, I really think a lot of this comes from just this like total politicization of everything. Like everyone is expected to have an opinion on things. They're expected to have like a strong opinion on things. And a lot of times they're things that like really do not concern most people. And so like it's absurd to me that like the broader public is having a debate about what kind of healthcare like I should have access to. I think that's something that's like it's not for layman people. They should not be debating this. It should be something that's like between doctors, like medical professionals who have reviewed literature on trans healthcare. Those are the people, as well as trans people themselves, who should be like having these conversations. But because like the way that our political system is organized, it encourages everyone to get involved. And not only for everyone to get involved, but for everyone to like inflame their own sides to
And dig in.
ridiculous extremes. Exactly. Because that's what really gets people like, generates wealth and power and status for people to do is to engage in like fanning these flames. And that incentive structure is just so incredibly broken.
Yes. I'm trying to think of, like, I'm terrible at coming up with shit like right off the top of my head, but like the trans issue is great. The like what's being taught in schools is another one, but like this this thing where you kind of have to walk on eggshells about how you just certain topics and like not professional, but like just in like public settings, um, because you don't know how we're going to interpret them,
Mhm.
um, is weird. Because I think everybody should get involved and should learn about everything and like have um, maybe not a strong opinion on everything, but like I don't mind you talking about like if you're not trans. Learning about trans issues or talking about trans issues and trying to figure them out. But I think the issue comes at the end there, what with what you said, where it becomes something that they have to like defend as like from their side or whatever. That's when it's weird.
Well, I think it's
Um,
the investment, right? Because like it's fine if you have an opinion on things or like you want to research it for your own, like intellectual curiosity. I think the problem is though, like when it becomes this sort of like matter of incredible,
Policy,
yeah, policy to you.
like where you're trying
Um,
to like like regulate or to
yeah, I
like
think so. I think that's like problematic. And like this is going to get into like, I don't know, probably distinctions between you and me, but like
abortion. There's another good one. There
abortion's
we go.
another one, sure. And I think like one of the things that I like about America, again, is that like you can have individual communities that have strong moral inclinations that like abortion is wrong. And I think it should be their right to like ban abortion within their communities and like therefore suffer the consequences. Either way of that. I think that's like an appropriate thing. And if you don't want to engage in that community, you don't have to engage in that community.
That's why I love federalism. I love our
Yeah.
federalist system, and um, like I'm pro-choice, and you know, I think the Roe v. I think Roe v. Wade as a decision was horrible, but the because just because it was done as like a judicial decision, it was horribly written. But like the way the structure that it laid out, if you were to codify that, it'd probably be really good law. Um,
This is the Ruth
but in
Bader
yeah,
Ginsburg opinion, basically.
yes. So by in by allowing states the ability to make their own decision, um, I do like that. But I've been talking with Ranger and Rogue, who is like another center center right person, and he thinks it should be federally done, because he doesn't like the just move argument when it comes to like abortion because of the healthcare aspect of it all. So I'm fighting. I'm having that internal debate with myself, because I don't know if this is an area where the federal government should take a role in it, or if it should just be left to the states, because I do typically lean on, let your state decide. But I don't know.
I would prefer personally for it to be left to the states, but I think that like if there's enough popular support from Americans in general that they think that like it's good and within the framework of the Constitution to ban access or to enforce access to something. I think that like the reason we have a federal government is for situations where enough people have like interest in the behaviors of people in other states. So like we know that abortion access is like very correlated with crime, and like the ability to have control of over your reproductive decisions is what allows you to like make sure that when you do raise children, you're raising them in homes that can really provide them the resources necessary to make sure that they don't have incentives to engage in crime later on in life. This is like a pretty well established sociological connection. So like I think you can look at a state and say that like, okay, well if you allow if you ban abortion in Alabama, and what you see is like rising crime rates in Alabama as a result, that is like causing spillover issues into neighboring states, I think you might say that like, okay, well now other states have like a reasonable interest in what Alabama is doing with banning abortion because it's affecting everybody then. And I think that like when that happens, you have like good federal justification for creating laws which are affecting the entire nation. And so I think that like you could make that argument, and like that's the reason why we have a government which can legislate for all of the states. And so like if it's borne out in practice that like banning abortion in individual
Yes,
states
exactly.
has negative effects for like everyone or in general is causing issues, like that's why we have a government that does have the ability to legislate.
We have these mechanisms in place to get this shit done. My problem comes when you just say, fuck those mechanisms, we're going to do it this way. Well, okay, no, we're not going to just do it this way, because eventually you're going to run into a Mr. Samuel Alito, and he's going to go, oh, well, you did it wrong, so guess what? Now we get to play by the rules, and we're going to fucking get rid of this. And it leads into situations that we have right now, with this Roe situation. And it's funny because I am interested to see how much this affects the election outcomes we see in November. Because personally, I don't think this is a issue that ends up being politically advantageous for the Democrats. I don't think this swings. I don't think this swings the bar enough. I think you'll see some improvement, and you'll, especially like you're seeing polling right now that's like, oh look, the Democrats are doing way better ever since the Roe decision. I don't know if that's going to be the case over the long term. But yeah, like I said, I think enough people are moderate on abortion where it's like, in the first trimester, I think most people are just okay with how Roe is set up, where it's like most people are okay with abortion in the first trimester. They are okay with it with some exceptions in the second, and then most people are just not cool with third trimester abortions. Typically, unless there's complications with the mother, shit like that. And I can't believe we're even in a world where there are Republican politicians actually talking about like criminalizing the women who get the abortions. Like, you want to talk about a political loser? It's that shit. that shit, when they start doing stuff like that, I will, yeah, that will be a political problem for the Republicans. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think this is going to end up, moving the needle that much. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think abortion polling is really interesting because men are more likely to identify as pro-life than women are. But when you actually ask them like more specific questions, like are you okay with an abortion in the second trimester if it's like threatening a woman's life, right? Or are you okay with abortions up to, you know, 25 weeks? If you ask like more granular questions, what you find out is that like men and women actually have pretty similar opinions on these things. And it's something like 70-30, where it's like people who are generally supportive of abortions with exceptions. So, like up to a limit. And then there are people, like some minority of people who are more hardline and just don't want abortions in general. And so I think that, like, if you look at those numbers, I think what you find is that, like, the men and women who are against abortions tend to live in the same area. So like if you go to like these very conservative places, it's not like you're finding all the men in the conservative areas are anti-abortion and all the women are pro-abortion. What you actually find is that like the women and the men in the conservative areas are against the idea of getting abortions. And when you go to the liberal areas, men and women are both for getting abortions or
Yeah,
easy access to it.
I hate how this conversation is spoken about like it's all women. Like
Yeah,
all
exactly.
women
Which is
are
not true.
pro-choice.
Like,
That's
talk
just
to
not.
conservative women. They
Let
are
me talk
against
to my
abortions.
sister. My sister hates my pro-choice opinion. She thinks I'm a fucking barbarian.
Yeah. And so, like, I don't think it's that if you have like a community in Missouri that is like banning access to abortions, I don't think it's that like you're going to see mass exodus of women from Missouri. 'Cause the reality is that like in conservative states, women tend to be anti-abortion or pro-life in general. So yeah, I think that's something that's like good to keep in mind. And like if a community in general has these moral, you know, intuitions, I think they should be able to live and like regulate their community as they see fit within the bounds of the Constitution. And yeah,
Um, Out of curiosity, I don't know how much time you have allotted for me. I do appreciate you having me on though. Um, I got like 30 more minutes. Did you have anything else? Because I have like two more things I wanted to ask you about. I didn't know if you had anything more that you wanted to talk about on the abortion or like the
nothing
this.
specific. You can go ahead and keep asking questions.
Um, so with and this kind of sticks to the broader topic. Um, but so with this shooting that we just saw shootings, but the Buffalo one, you didn't see as much like gun control discussion around that because it wasn't politically like they couldn't figure out a way to do it because the gun was bought legally. Or yeah, and Buffalo or New York has a lot of gun control.
It wasn't advantageous for the
Yeah,
Democrats.
yes, but you're seeing it heavily with this school shooting. Um, I mean, before the fucking kids' bodies were even cold, you had people coming out just going on rants about how the Republicans want your kids to fucking die because they don't want more gun control and more restrictions to the Second Amendment. Um, do you when we start saying like when we start doing shit like that, when we start you're starting to see like politicians say that Republicans want your kids to die because they don't like have the same like political opinion as you. Where do you think that leads?
I mean, I think that rhetoric is really scary. When you start saying things like Republicans want your kids to die. I will say that like I personally like fall on the gun control issue differently than a lot of right-wing people. I think a lot of right-wing people are like very invested in the Constitution and sort of like the norms of that. And my approach to like deriving right-wing principles puts me in like a different place where I think that like a world where people have access to guns is desirable, but I don't think that American culture is like ready for that in a lot of ways. So I think that like when you have such widespread issues with mental health, with poverty, and with crime, having like the ability to get access to guns is a kind of scary thing. Um, but if you're able to like improve society to the point where there's less crime, less mental health issues, and less, poverty, which is, causing crime, then I think that you can open up access to more gun rights. And that's kind of like that's a very confusing position for people because I see libertarianism and like individual rights to access things as a very desirable state. I think you should try to get to a society that requires very little government intervention. But getting to that society is another factor entirely. So like one example of this is if you go out into the suburbs, you'll find that like the suburbs have not a lot of police presence versus if you go into like, I'm in Austin, Texas. So if I go down like Southeast Austin, I'm seeing cop cars everywhere. And I don't see that in West Austin, where it's very rich. And it's not because like more cops cause crime. In fact, it's the opposite. But the reason why you have less cops in richer areas is because they need less like government intervention to be safe. There is more spontaneous order in these areas. And so I think that if we can create like conditions to improve society such that you have the arising of spontaneous order, then I think you can open up access to guns. But the improving of society has to come first.
Yes. My thought is we have had this access to firearms for a very, very long time. We have not had this
These
mass
problems,
shooting
yeah.
issue. And I'm not talking, when people talk about mass shootings, I think it's very important to distinguish what we are talking about. I am not talking about gang violence. I am not talking about domestic violence issues where a guy ends up shooting his whole family. I am not talking about, I'm talking about these instances where people go to public places with weapons to kill as many people as they can and then either kill themselves or go to put their hands up because they want to get caught and go to court. There is clearly another factor involved. I don't know what that is, but I know it is not just the guns, and it's just like when we start acting like it's this one issue, it's this problem, this is the thing, you are ignoring whatever the real problem is, and we are actually getting further away from the truth by doing that. And by people immediately coming out and blaming it on guns and saying that gun control is what the issue is, and that if you don't think that's the right answer, like you want fucking kids to die, it's like, okay, we aren't getting anywhere. We're actually probably exacerbating this issue. I,
Yeah, I mean,
like
I
I
think
don't.
it's good to like create a society where you can allow people access to guns and not have mass shootings. Because that's the goal ultimately, is to provide people the maximum amount of liberty. Um, and you just have to be able to create a society where that's possible and that doesn't result in mass shootings and these horrific deaths.
Yeah, and like we have to come up with solutions that actually are like feasible and that could like there's a right wing push right now to like provide like security, like funding for security for all like K through 12 institutions and stuff like that. Like that's at least a real solution or like a possible solution or like to start to work and figure out ways to stop this, because I just don't know if this is going away. Because what I think it is it's a desire for people to be famous or like have attention brought to them, regardless of how that attention or regardless of how that's achieved. And
Whether it's good or bad attention, they just want attention.
yes, and even I think even if you removed guns, just if we said poof, all the guns are gone from the world, there would be means of people doing this where they harm a bunch of people in order to bring about that like attention. And
I think that's
I don't
kind of
know if that's
true.
correct. Yeah, I don't know if that's correct, but that's like what I've been trying to like figure out, because I just think both sides right now are just like looking past they're like missing the forest for the trees.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing about guns is they're force multiplier ultimately. And so like the ability to do harm is really it's dependent on like your will, but also your like the tools you have at your disposal. So I think like if you could snap your fingers and poof all, civilian access to guns goes away, I think that that would reduce gun deaths, like very obviously. It would reduce the number of gun killings. But like proof all the guns are gone is not a real policy. It's not something
Yeah.
you can do. And so I think like the reality is like Americans are not going to give up their guns. And like the gun proliferation in this country is such that a real like crackdown on guns, even if it, even if it were to reduce gun crime, is something that's like really hard to achieve. And so I think that like
It's
maybe,
impossible at this point,
right, it's like
honestly.
arguably impossible, even if I personally think it would have positive effects. And so that's why I like bring up, creating the kind of society and culture that can have guns and engage with them responsibly. I think that would be really desirable.
This is it's weird because you're 100% correct, because at the core of what you're saying is I 100% with you. I want more freedom for more people, and if you want the freedom to have a gun, you should have that freedom. Um, but I also know there are limiting factors to that, and there's like the reality that we actually live in, and we we have to. I really do think there are mental health aspects to this that are just like we're doing something wrong. So I'm trying to ask as many people as I can what their thoughts are on that. So I do appreciate that.
Well,
Um,
the other thing too is like political polarization and gun control, because I think we can imagine societies, right? Like if you go to, if you're like looking at Afghanistan occupation by the United States and the degree to which there was like intense political struggles in Afghanistan and political factions that were willing to do like incredibly radical things. You do not want, like, if you're the United States government and you want peace and order in Afghanistan, you do not want proliferation of guns in that country. You want to be able to like massively crack down on guns and access to them by the general population. And so I think that like when you have a very fraught and chaotic culture in society, you don't want people to have access to these force multipliers. But when you have a society that is orderly and with like stable political institutions and low chance of revolution and lots of trust and social cohesion, right? Which America is like a country that's increasingly politically divided and polarized. I think it's increasingly dangerous to have high proliferation of guns in the United States with that polarization. And so the other way to like make guns less dangerous is to decrease like the incentive for people to use them to make statements. And so like the Buffalo shooter, I believe he was the one with the manifesto, right? Like
Hmm.
that's an example of political polarization and extremism, which is leading to gun violence. So like you can crack down on guns, or you can crack down on the political polarization, but you can't have both of these things because both of these things is a disaster.
This is this is true. But I wonder if like the Buffalo shooter, would he have, if given a different like set of circumstances, still gone out and killed people, but for a different reason, right? So if like there wasn't this political polarization for him to latch onto and to like give him like uh, a purpose, I want to make it clear that I'm putting air quotes around purpose, for his actions, would he have, would his brain, is his brain wired in a way that he was built to end up hurting people for a purpose, and that purpose could have been anything? Or is it he had that political like mindset literally take him from A to B, which is this political mindset, and now that leads to killing people? I just think,
So I think it's the latter. And like one of the things you brought up
really,
earlier is we've had guns in this country for a long time, but the trend of these mass shootings and these like political killings is something that seems pretty unique. And so I think that that is really like a consequence of a lot of factors. And like one of the factors you brought up was like media attention, and like the ability for people to get famous. I think that's one of them. And I think another one of them is political radicalization. And so I think there are some people who are just going to engage in violence and crime and murder anyways, right? And they're going to find a reason to do that. And then I
exactly.
think there are some people who can be radicalized into it. And as long as there are some people who can be radicalized into it, or some people who are going to want to do it to get attention, the ability to get attention or to get politically radicalized are going to cause gun deaths.
That's true, because like when you look at like I hate when people bring up like Nazi Germany, but like when you look at like the people who like carried out the actual genocide, like the people who worked in the camps, the guards, the cogs in the machine, at the end of the day, those people probably weren't, you know, psychopaths, and like just like they were just people who were able to be wrapped up in a political system that then called for that. So
I agree. And like if you put them in a different scenario, I don't think they would have become Nazi prison guards. But it was the specific cultural and political environment that they were in that pushed them to that.
yeah, and I guess I do believe it, like I do believe this because I've fought so hard against like Islamic extremism, because I've always said that like that has taken, like this scripture has taken scripture, and then like other radicals have taken this good thing and they've manipulated it to then lead somebody to believe they should go blow themselves up or shoot up a place. So I guess the same could be said, but then that gives credence to like we really, really need to fight hard against uh, these groups and these extremes in America, no matter how fringe they may be. Because like people don't talk about it on the left, but there are plenty of these same like radical, like violent radicals on the left. So it's like if we're gonna go after one, we should probably just go after all of them. But yes, I do. I'm probably on your side there. That this is partly to blame on the politics of these people.
I think so. At least that's where I fall.
Yeah, that's a good point. Um, yeah, I got enough time. So, uh, do you mind if I ask about like less serious shit and
Yeah, go ahead.
ask? So, how did so like I've been seeing your name get tossed out as hippy dippy rookie of the year, like um, you've had this like because how long have you been streaming?
Not too long. I my
No.
first conversation with Destiny like December or something.
Okay. So, when you started this, did you want to become a big streamer, or did you do this as like a you enjoyed this and it was something that you were doing as like a hobby or like as like for fun at first, and it just so happened that you jumped like this, or did you work at making it happen? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that I sort of fell into it just because like I I sort of wanted to stream for a while, but like the way that I wanted to stream was like not necessarily to talk about politics, but to just talk about like random lifestyle stuff or to just like watch YouTube videos and just sort of like, I don't know, do very casual streams. But I really enjoy talking about politics and arguing with people. And so like the urge to do that was just like, this is what I really find fun. I really find it fun to like get into the mud a little bit and to like argue with people and to have these complex conversations. And so I really did just more fall into that because I thought it was enjoyable.
Okay. So the reason I ask is because like I said, I came into the scene because I got told like, oh, you would enjoy doing this, and I was doing a project, and I've just like enjoyed getting in and like you said, like arguing with people and like discussing shit. And I think that leads me to give my real opinions and to actually express shit in good faith and to listen to people in good faith, and then also enjoy the, the environment and the ecosystem as it is. I have seen since getting in here that a lot of the smaller and the not big names on the platforms, because I'm mostly dealing with smaller people, they really want to bitch about the space and who gets big and who like the that aspect of it, like why aren't I growing and like blah, blah, like whatever. um do you like why do why do so many people do this with the intention of like making money or becoming again like becoming famous or getting a name for the like it seems like you're gonna come in here and just be bad faith and be say whatever you think is going to get you clout, and you're going to clout chase, and you're going to do things that harm the that make this a worse space, if that makes sense. um I'm curious on your thoughts on that, because it has shocked me uh, to see how some people act and to see how some people view this space.
I mean, I think that like clout chasing and sort of engaging in bad faith, it can be like profitable. And so I think people are like ultimately like they're financially motivated. And if being like a sort of bad faith debater who clout chases all the time gets you money, people will do that. And so like I definitely feel like personally there's like pressure for me to engage in clout chasing behaviors um, because I know that I'm going to see like results for doing that. So yeah, there's definitely like pressure to do that. But I also think that like as a long-term strategy, um, I think the reason why someone like Destiny has been so successful in the space is because Destiny just loves streaming and he loves having conversations with people and he's very able to be like authentically himself because he's not trying to put on an act or fit into any group. And so like long term, that ability to like authentically be yourself, I think is really beneficial. And like personally, like I view my engagement as like playing the long term game where like I don't think that having these political conversations is necessarily going to be like the thing that always gets the most viewers in the short term. But what I want to do is like build up an authentic following of people who are like-minded with me. And that's what I'm really going to enjoy in the long term. I'm not going to enjoy being just like, I don't know, a React like titty streamer, even if that might get me a lot of viewers in the short.
Yeah, I just like I want I want to know what people actually believe because I'm just trying to work through the world and like understand the world better than I did the day before. And the thing that's been a little depressing is that like I don't believe a lot of these people are giving me their true opinions or giving yeah, just get like I think they're just lying or they're like get because the way that this maybe it's just me. I don't know. It just feels like some of these opinions that I hear are just so ludicrous on this space like in this space that I don't want to believe the world's that fucking crazy. Like I don't want to believe we live in a
Sort of
world
like
where
post-law,
we're
right?
going I don't know, I just don't want to believe we're in a world where trans genocide is a real concern for people. That's what I'm scared about. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I don't know. I think that like it's hard to say, but I think it's easier to like assume stupidity than it is to assume malice. Or like I think it's more reliable to assume stupidity than to assume malice. Um, I don't think that
I
people generally do like the major grifting where they'll just like talk about things but not actually believe any of them.
see I do that in my real life and in my real life conversations with people, but because we're behind a screen, you know what I mean? And it's just like it's the it's the desire for growth over the like actually giving good opinions or giving your real opinions is what I find weird. I don't know.
Mhm.
Uh, like a good example of this is Hake. I don't know if you know who I'm talking about. That fucking crazy conservative dude that was. I think he was on. Was he an Infowars
It sounds
contributor?
vaguely familiar. I think it's like the
Yeah.
Hague Report or something.
Yes. He like just the way that sometimes he'll say shit in order to just trigger people into to like just getting like super pissed and basically the whole conversation breaks down. I'm like, okay, you meant to do that. You don't believe that. You just knew that that was gonna end up fucking stirring the pot enough that you got attention or whatever. But I don't know. I just my big thing is what I've seen of you, you're one of the more like principled people I've listened talk to on the platform. So I just wanted to thank you, congratulate you on your success, and continue continue doing what you're doing. Because honestly, there aren't enough people like in that ideological grouping here. So it is good that we're doing well.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I definitely try to be, and I will say that like I definitely feel the pressure to be like a little bit bad faith or a little bit controversial or like to just like generally push the envelope a little bit more than I would otherwise be. Because I think that like a lot of times that's unfortunately like how you get invited to talk to people is if you're willing to sort of like embody an exaggerated version of your opinions. And I think that like navigating that is really hard and something that I'm still figuring out.
For sure. No, yeah, and uh, headstrong. Keep fucking fighting that urge because you're smart enough and have good enough takes to make it on your own. But um, hopefully in the future I'll get on a panel with you. I think I've been on one with you in the past, but hopefully we get a chance to talk again. And then if you ever have time, I'd love to come and pick your brain again.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Thanks for talking. It was fun.
No problem. Do you care if I shout myself out really quick?
Yeah, no, do it.
Yeah, just you can follow me on YouTube, Half Baked Takes, and then on Twitter, Todd from Half Baked Takes. Appreciate it, and you have a great rest of your Thursday.
Yeah, thank you. You too. Have a good one.
Talk soon.
Poggers. That was fun. Um, okay, Adam Friended says that I should talk to him on Tuesday. Which I think would be good. I feel like I was really like struggling to express some of my viewpoints just over Twitter. Um, let's read chat. I love reading chat. Chat. Oh my god. You're chatting. You like my streams? I'm glad. I'm glad you like them. Become a big titty streamer. I do want to do a little bit of titty streaming. Let's see. Oh, I'm gonna update my titles. Wow, chat is what is chat seems like a disaster right now. Mm. Browsing. What is this? The Narrow Corridor. I forgot what this book is. Interesting. I think someone recommended this book to me. Yeah, exactly. You leave chat alone for 1 second. Everything falls apart. My Twitter is very different from your expectations. How so? I think that I should try to do more panels. Maybe get back into hippy dippy. Um, dogs, dogs, dogs. I seem to be not crazy conservative. I enjoyed this talk, just like the one with Wash. Stay sane. Your take on Destiny? Destiny is interesting. I like talking to him. I was like, I've watched a lot of Destiny content, but I find talking to Destiny a little bit awkward sometimes. I sort of want to do like a long form video, um, scripted video on my politics stuff, on like my political positions. Ooh, we could also watch YouTube. Maybe that would be fun. Uh, Hippy Dippy is a politics like stream thing. It's like a round table discussion panel. I don't know that much about the death penalty, to be honest. I'm not informed enough to have a good take. Yeah, I'm a hippie for sure. I sort of want chat. I'm gonna adjust this. So I want chat to be underneath me. And we can put Venmo donation stuff on the other side. There we go. Incredible. Let me scale this down or put it in the corner. I think there are some instances in which it's appropriate to kill people. That sounds like so insane, but like self-defense would be like one of them. Yeah, I should add a black border. I don't remember how to do that. What's it called? Have touch follow. Oh, outline. Outline color, select color, black. Outline size. Sick. Ooh, we could watch this video, or we could watch the Great Replacement video by Dev. I'm a big fan of Short Fat Otaku.
So I was
Feels a lot
reading
of
the
good
Buffalo
stuff.
Shooter's manifesto for last week's Tubcast, and I'm
Oh,
sure I
boy.
need to tell you this, but a lot of his motivation revolved around the Great Replacement. In case you don't know, though I think everyone knows this by now, the Great Replacement is a conspiracy theory by the French writer Renaud Camus? I don't know French, guys, even though I'm a Canadian, I don't know French. It states that the predominantly ethnic French population of France is actively being replaced by a 1-2 punch of declining indigenous French birth rates and an increase of foreign immigration to France, specifically of the non-European variety, more specifically of the Muslim variety. He believes this is a coordinated effort by a cabal of elites within French society that he calls the Replacists, though he only wrote about this idea in the context of France in his 2011 book, The Grand Replacement. The idea has a lot of similarity with the theories of the American neo-Nazi David Lane, who coined the phrase white genocide to refer to, this exact same thing, low fertility rates and high amounts of non-white immigration to America, leading to a demographic decline of white people. Being a neo-Nazi, Lane obviously blamed a cabal of Jews running everything in place of the French Replacists. But there's a lot of overlap between the two ideas, such that in the modern era, the phrases Great Replacement and white genocide have become synonymous despite them having two different origins. And the Buffalo Shooter used both of their rhetoric interchangeably in his manifesto. By the way, if you're watching this on YouTube, ever since the Buffalo Massacre, YouTube's been adding these COVID-type cards to every video discussing the topic. You can probably see one right here below. It's nice to see that shepherding viewers to politically approved sources is alive and well, even though lockdowns are over. Yes, YouTube, the great savior, save us all from wrongthink. I'm just joking around, please don't demonetize me. In the wake of Buffalo, just like in the wake of Christchurch, the online left began to blame a number of rightist creators for spreading the Great Replacement conspiracy theory, and therefore radicalizing people into violence. One of these people so blamed is Lauren Southern. I got into it a little bit in the Paul Joseph Watson video. The TLDR on Lauren Southern is that while she was much more libertarian and conspiracy-y in her youth, she left the alt-right, left the internet, started a family, and came back a year or two later as a very standard conservative mom type. Left-leaning people have been very vocal in blaming Destiny for helping rehab Lauren's image among centrists, since the two of them have palled around a lot on stream since her return. And she does seem to genuinely be moving away from some of her more radical older views. So now the discourse is, Destiny, how—
I think that progressives need to be really careful in the way that they discuss these kind of like Great Replacement type things. So I think the tendency is to just like outright deny everything. And like, it is true that the birth rates of white people are decreasing and that white people are going to become a minority in, for example, the United States in time. So I think you have to like really acknowledge and contend with that fact, and not just like dismiss it out of hand. So I think that like I had a discussion way back with Brittany of Politically Provoked. And the thing that really radicalized her was this experience of progressive and lefty people who just like outright denied the idea that white people would become a racial minority in the United States, and denied that that might have any like effects. So I think that like when you argue with these things, you have to be careful that you're not pushing people into beliefs that you disagree with. Taft was the history of limiting and exclusion of immigrants from non-European countries in the US a genocide? No, I don't think that like limiting immigration is genocide. That's really stretching the definition of genocide if you do think that's the case.
How could you associate with a person who inspired Christchurch in Buffalo? It's possible that Lauren's aware of the influence that she's had because her own video on the Great Replacement in 2017 has been set to private on her channel. I know this because Sean did a video replying to it back in the day, and he links her.
Yeah, so like the main two problems with GRT, Great Replacement Theory, I'm guessing, is that it implies an intentional plan and it argues the white skin is inherently more American. So I think that's good. Like, if you want to argue against those things, I think you should argue against those things, and be like very careful in the way you approach these arguments.
Hers in the description, and clicking on it brings up the fact that it's private, so it's easy to actually confirm. That being said, it's not hard to find a copy of Lauren's video, and since a big meta conversation in the Twitch politics space right now is Lauren rehabbing her image, I decided to watch it to see what the fuss was all about.
The Great Replacement is a term coined by French writer Renaud Camus.
Oh yeah, that's how you pronounce the name. Thanks, Lauren. You know what? I actually didn't see this video back in 2017, and based on the number of people screeching online, I thought this was going to be a video of Lauren Southern sacrificing black babies to Moloch or something. But you know what? She's very inflammatory, using some of the B-roll in the way that she does. I don't agree with her conclusions, but the actual raw data in the video seems to be accurate. The birth rates of native people in first world countries, not just white ones, but clearly places like Japan and South Korea as well, are down. Immigration is slowly replacing those empty spots where new kids would have previously filled them, and immigrants also tend to have more children. And separate from Lauren's video, separate from any sort of conspiracy theory, separate from whether or not this is good or bad, intentional or not, the facts bear this out. Here is the world's fertility rate by country. Here is immigration by country. You can go check this out yourself. The data is in on this. And despite the data being in, we've seen a massive push from the legacy media to declare that it's just not happening, and that you're actually a racist white nationalist if you think it is. The New York Times, for example, stated that Tucker Carlson uses rhetoric related to an unfounded racist conspiracy theory that falling birth rates in immigration are leading to the replacement of white people. Versions of replacement theory have been promoted by extremists and have helped inspire mass shootings. I don't know what Tucker says in these episodes, but the claim from the New York Times that it's unfounded and racist to think that falling birth rates in immigration will lead to the replacement of white people just seems to be false. Check out this article by Tim Wise. Those who push replacement theory are to blame for racist terrorism. Looking at
I think also to like go one step further, when I talked to Brittany from Politically Provoked, one of her big worries is like the current progressive narrative and rhetoric around race is really that white people need to be punished for the sins of their ancestors and their wealth needs to be taken and given to other people. And there's a lot of like sentiment that it's okay to be racist against white people because white people are in power and the dominant group. And the worry is that that kind of sentiment that it's okay to be racist against white people is going to have enough inertia and momentum that when white people lose dominant control